Long ago, I lived in Shanghai. A big, annoying city with tons of people. My strange life began in the dorms of a military academy. I'm not sure why my parents chose that specific dorm. There were plenty of others for academy staff, but if I had to choose now, I'd pick the same one. Our dorm was called the third compound. The others had names like second compound, fourth compound, salt factory village, plum blossom village, east village, and orchid village. To this day, I still wonder who came up with those names. Totally random, out of order, confusing, and unforgettable. Each dorm left some kind of impression on me, mostly because of the kids who lived there. The adults? Not so much. They were all military staff, dressed in the same green uniforms, going to work and coming home like clockwork. You could barely tell them apart. The third compound had 7 rows of one-story condos, with wide open space in between. We took full advantage of the land in front and behind our homes. Growing vegetables, raising chickens and ducks. There was even a nurse we called 13 Points, who mentored her husband to plant rice. He only did it once. He had no way to grind the grain into actual rice, and that was the end of his farming career. The whole place felt like a mini agricultural production team. The fourth compound was made up of dozens of small, Japanese-style 2-story houses. The grounds were spotless, not even a weed grow. The people who lived there had that classic Shanghai pride that came with foreign-style housing. Somehow, they even invented their own made-up language, sounded vaguely like Japanese, and they'd chat in it among themselves. No one else had a clue what they were saying. Salt Factory Village used to house workers from a small salt company. It was tiny, like a little hotel. I walked past it many times and never saw a single living soul. Plum Blossom Village had no walls and no plum blossoms either. Just a bunch of rows of one-story houses on huge slabs of concrete. I always guessed it had once been a parking lot for military trucks, definitely not a place for farming or raising birds. From far away, you could always see kids playing with rubber bands or bouncing rubber balls across the empty ground. East Village was home to academy teachers and hospital doctors. It was quiet, almost too quiet. You didn't see many people hanging around. Parents and kids were probably all indoors, studying. Unsurprisingly, this place produced a lot of top students and future nerds. Orchid Village sounded lovely, but there were no orchids. Not even weeds. What it did have was a large field of red sand ground and rows of red townhouses. It was home to the big shots, the president, political commissar, deans of the college and hospital, senior officers, some of whom had fought in the Long March and the anti-Japanese war. Their kids, the so-called second-generation Reds, roamed the area like a gang of mini warlords. Always ready to fight. No one dared mess with them. From other dorms, we treated them like hedgehogs, dangerous from every angle. As for the second compound, honestly, I'm not even sure it existed. I'd only ever heard people mention it. I never met a single person who claimed to live there. And then there was the first compound, but that wasn't a dorm. It was just shorthand for the military academy's first affiliated hospital. At the time, I was in elementary school. I had a neighbor named Lu Haijun. We were classmates. Lu Haijun had spent his early childhood living with his grandmother in Zhenjiang. When he started elementary school, he moved to Shanghai to live with his parents. He spoke with a Zhenjiang accent. We called him Nanjing Salted Duck, or just Nanjing Duck for short. Technically, he should have been called Zhenjiang Salted Duck, but no one had ever heard of that as a dish, and Zhenjiang wasn't far from Nanjing anyway, so Nanjing Duck it was. Nanjing Duck's dad, Old Lu, was an anatomy instructor at the military academy. He was pale-skinned, thin, and often seen around dusk sitting on a small stool under an old willow tree. In his right hand was a scalpel, in his left, a pair of forceps. With a quick pinch, he'd grab a fat toad, there were toads jumping everywhere, practically an infestation, and skillfully perform a full dissection. In no time, he'd skin the toad and slice its bloody flesh into fine strips with surgical scissors to feed his hens. The ground beneath that willow was always stained dark red from toad blood. Watching this kind of backyard surgery was absolutely stomach-turning, but we couldn't look away. One weekend evening, I was once again standing in a crowd of idlers, watching Old Lu slaughter toads. A girl named Shan Xiaoyun. Round face, always putting on airs, covered her mouth with her hand and turned her head away in mock horror. She said to another girl next to her, so tragic, while sneakily watching the girl's reaction. That other girl was Zhou Wuming. Her face didn't register much of anything. Seeing Old Lu butcher toads was just another everyday scene, and besides, she'd just helped her dad pluck feathers off a dead chicken. Zhou Wuming's father, Old Zhou, worked in propaganda at the academy and was also a correspondent for several newspapers. When Zhou Wuming was a month old, Old Zhou took her to the police station to register her residency. The officer asked, "What's the child's name?" Only then did Old Zhou realize, he'd forgotten to name her. So he made one up on the spot, Zhou Wuming. Literally, Zhou no name. Old Zhou was a Hui Muslim, but their family ate pork. Not only pork, but also chicken, and he was a master at slaughtering chickens. He thought the best way to kill a chicken is to half-kill it, cut a small slit in the chicken's neck. The cut couldn't be too big, or the chicken would die instantly. With just a shallow gash, the chicken would start gasping like an asthmatic patient, panting and flopping around with its neck turning drooping toward the ground, before finally keeling over. You might think Old Zhou had some kind of sadistic disorder, but he insisted that chickens killed this way tasted better. He believed that chickens got very tense before death, which made their muscles tighten up. So he let them jump and twitch a little to relax the muscles. Relaxed muscles, tender meat. I don't know if chickens understand what death is, neither know they tense up because they know they're dying, nor do any ways to verify it. However, judging by their expressions and behavior, they sure seemed nervous. A chicken with its head hanging low, eyes wide open, blood trickling from a slit in its neck, hopping frantically across the ground, it looked both anxious and in pain. So, if you saw a crowd of people standing in a circle in our compound, it was probably either Old Lu was demonstrating live toad slicing, or Old Zhou was directing the chicken death dance. I sometimes wondered, maybe the chickens hoped the toads got to jump around a bit too. After all, chickens liked eating toad meat. Toads that had jumped before dying probably tasted tender and delicious. Wait, chickens don't even have teeth. Shan Xiaoyun's father, Old Shan, had some kind disease. He lay in bed all day, his skin yellowish, his belly sometimes flat, sometimes swollen. Once a week, he went to the hospital, to get the water drained from his stomach, people said. Why didn't he just go to the bathroom? I used to walk back and forth past their door, staring at his belly. A belly that could grow and shrink. That fascinated me. Old Sean looked a lot like his daughter, just with a longer face. He must have been quite the handsome guy in his youth. The walls around in their room used to be decorated with portraits of the 10 marshals, military caps, shoulder epaulets, the whole deal. Later, those pictures disappeared. They were replaced by portraits of the commander-in-chief and the deputy commander. Old Sean lay in bed every day, gazing up at them. Sean Sherion's mother's surname was Luo. Her front teeth stuck out, her tongue was sharp, and her eyes were always darting around. The story went like this: she met Old Sean on a train. Old Sean was tall, handsome, with a pistol tucked into his waistband. She thought he must have been at least a regiment commander and boldly struck up a conversation. Old Sean didn't correct her, maybe he was waiting for someone just like her. Either way, they hit it off. It wasn't until they were getting married that Old Sean confessed. He was just a bodyguard for a regiment commander. That's when she realized she'd picked the wrong guy. I always figured the reason she hung up all those military portraits was to give her husband something to aim for, or maybe to inspire him to fight his illness. But soon after that, Old Sean passed away. Between the west gate of the academy and our compound there stretched a patch of natural wetlands, dotted with a dozen or so small ponds. Whenever it rained, the overflowing water from the ponds would slowly gather and drift into the nearby Chio River. There were grassy meadows blooming with wildflowers. On the meadows and around the ponds stood crooked willows, upright poplars, and some nameless shrubs. In the summertime, cicadas screeched from the trees, sparrows and willow warblers darted between branches and across the grass, and fish and shrimp glided through the ponds. The boys in our compound often scaled the wall to play in this wetland. We shot birds with slingshots, climbed trees, used gluten balls to catch cicadas, and cow bang in the ponds. Cow bang is Shanghainese. It means to dam off a small area in a pond using mud, then bail out the water with buckets, leaving the fish and shrimp to be stalled in the mud, a brutal method to catch the fish. One day, Nanjing Duck and I climbed the wall again. Just as he reached out to grab a willow branch, he let out a scream and fell. Turned out, he'd grabbed a clump of something, the guts of a toad. Most likely leftovers from when old Lou was slicing meat. Some jerk must have stashed them in the crook of the tree. He flailed his hands wildly, and the wad of toad innards flew right past my face, nearly brushing the tip of my nose. I screamed and bolted. The next morning on the way to school, I ran into Nanjing Duck again. I put the toad intestines back, he told me, clearly not a good guy either. Well, the next kid to climb that tree was in for it. But then again, that one probably wouldn't be a good guy either, I thought. After that I washed my hands by the river for an hour, he added. Liar. He must have washed them in his kitchen, we didn't have a river in our compound. After that, Nanjing Duck stopped watching his dad dissect toads. I liked catching fish. My reason was silly, I liked the feeling of touching. Once I caught a fish, I would run my fingers along its body from head to tail. It had to be head to tail, the right direction, otherwise I'd be going against the scales and the fish would get mad and stab me with its fins. Sliding my fingers along that slippery fish felt like touching the thigh of an imaginary beauty. Every nerve in my body relaxed. I know this sounds kind of disgusting. But I'd bet more people like touching fish than not, and most of them are men. Though maybe some women do too. Who knows? But the fish clearly didn't enjoy it. House cats and lapdogs are the ones who enjoy being petted.